All the other ones, because all of them failed to place it as the main subject. So this is the grammar. So this is kind of like you have this subject subordinate conjunction, and then you also have this. So redundancy or all the other by which it is, right? So like concerns with, so for example, law troubles, that's a colloquial language. Too much word matters for the law court is too long, right? And this is a possessive, so you don't need a camera. You're a painter, such as, you know. Constructive construction. It's a constructive. Contractions. Contractions. Okay, and this next one. Ordinating conjunction, yeah, so choice C. All right. These are good, actually. Okay. All right. Oops. All right. Hmm. Where's Aaron? What happened?
That's why. You could thought of some other one.
Here you go. Hey, Aaron, how you doing, man? Can you hear me? Hey.
Hi.
Hey, thank you for sending that to me. I think like a lot of the words that you chose and then the grammar, it was pretty good. We'll probably go over that like it will take more time for me to go over it, so I think it's good maybe if we just go along with the lessons. Were you able to watch the videos?
I was able to watch the first one. I didn't finish the second one.
Okay, yeah, the first one was just review, but is that good though? Like, it's a little short, but like it does do some review.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess the second one, it wasn't really complete. It was just something I found that was like kind of related. Okay. So how are you today?
Good.
Okay. Let's today, so since we're already starting this, I might as well just do the same thing. I'll do the theory and then we'll jump onto the application. But today's a little bit long. And my time is a little bit restrictive. Not as much as because I have an appointment at 4, another one. So okay, let's just go through it. So for today, we're gonna cover like run-ons and like comma splices, coordinating junctions, semicolons, and compound predicates, and like other ones. A lot of it is gonna be punctuations, when to use them or not to use them. So let's you've heard of run-ons, right? Yeah. So like run-ons typically are just like when we talked about last time about having independent and then fragments. So wait, what is this? And then So the fragments and then the independent clause, if you remember, like the fragment is like a dependent clause. So when you have a run-on, it's just when you're trying to join two sentences that are like independent, and like and for most part, you're not using like a conjunction, and then there's not like a comma or semicolon, and you're just putting them together. And there's gonna be a lot of that in the SAT. Like they're really easy to like recognize. So we'll just go over some of those. And another thing with like when you correct a run-on, like I said, you typically put in like a conjunction and a comma, and then or like a colon or a semicolon in between those two sentences. But there's this thing called like comma splice. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Okay. Just to briefly go over it, the comma splice is when, because the formula really, like it's not really a formula, it's more of just like a structure, is what you find here. When you have like a dependent, or let me say, when you have like an independent clause 1, and then you add this guy and another independent clause 2. Typically in the middle here, you have to put in, either this guy or you put in this guy. We're gonna talk about like when to put which, and then the other one would be putting a comma plus we call this a coordinating conjunction. And then coordinating conjunctions are just like and, for, nor, but, or, yet, or so. And there's this acronym. This is the coordinating conjunction right here. This acronym called fanboys. This is just a way for everyone to remember it. So you have like for, and, nor, but, yet, or so. So just to go back to it. So this comma splice, it's an error when you see it, because when you have this this comma plus a coordinating conjunction, you can't just have a comma there. You can't just have a comma, and then without this guy. And that's what you call a comma splice if you only have a comma without a coordinating conjunction. It's gonna make more sense once we talk about the example. You've probably seen it before though. Once you see it, and for a semicolon, yeah, we kind of touched on this. I know you asked a question about this, but when you can, the only time that you should connect them, there's like certain things that the most common way is when you connect like two independent clauses. So connect closely related independent clauses. And then the other one is there's an exception to that though. Is like when you add this moreover, nevertheless, however, therefore, then, all these guys, when you add this to the beginning of like either the first independent clause or the second one, it becomes kind of like a dependent clause. So that's kind of like an exception, because then you could when it becomes a dependent clause, then you could probably not. It's probably not good to put a semicolon. It's probably better to put like a comma.
Mm-hmm.
And another way that you could use a semicolon is when you're dividing an item list or like a list of items. So we'll show some examples of that. Like for example, like when you're stating like different states, cities and states, there's already a comma there. So people get kind of confused which comma belongs to which. So that's why when you do that and you state city and state and multiple of those, you usually put like a semicolon. And there's this rule. I don't think it shows up that much in the SAT, but it's always good to like, it's like that rule that like if it does show up, maybe like one problem, is this rare rule for semicolons is, when do you capitalize the letter, like after the semicolon? Like what if there's a letter here and there's a bunch of words? Do you capitalize this afterwards? The rule for that is you only capitalize it if that word is a pronoun or acronym. So like a proper noun, this is actually, if it's a proper noun, if it's a proper noun or an acronym. And there's also another rule that's kind of similar to that for colons, but we'll talk about that after. and this compound predicate, this right here is, if you ever seen the, like when you see this, like there's this, there's a bunch of sentence here, and then there's and here, right? But there's a comma here, right? Sometimes you can remove this comma if this guy and these guys are related, and there's like a noun here, and then right here there's no noun. So when there's a noun here and there's no noun here, you can actually remove this guy. If there's a noun here, if there's a noun right here, and there's also a noun here, you have to put a comma. So when you remove this comma, this is called a compound predicate, because they share the same subject, or the same noun that they're related with, like this guy and then this guy. So that's kind of like the theory of that, like run-ons and things that you can correct with it. Let's just go over like when those occur. So just like go over it together, and then we'll kind of skip a few parts. Talking about this guy, I walk, I run. What do you think is wrong with this one?
It's two independent clauses and they're not joined by anything.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, like I walk is one independent clause, I run is another one, and then all these are kind of similar. But what you can do is, the first thing is maybe add a semicolon. You're good to go if you just add it in the middle. And if you like right here, if you add it right here, and then the second one is you can either add an and or an or. You could do that in between. So like I walk and I run. So that's a coordinating conjunction. And the third one here, maybe you can add just two separate, sentences. So you can just make I walk and a period and I run. And then like, let's see something that's like more complicated here. Yeah. So for the most part, if you read through these, they're going to be very similar. The one thing that you want to look for is where that, like, like for this guy, like some of the sentences might be long, but you just have to know like where that divider is, like where that sentence doesn't make sense. Like, this whole thing, and I say, oh, there's another subject here, more than, and or, most productive. Let's see, hold up. Right here, actually, most productive, and then this guy right here doesn't really make sense. A lot of these are more like a gut feeling. It's like, oh, Wednesday is the day that my team is most productive. That's obviously a sentence. And then it just doesn't make sense to continue without like a separator when we end up finishing. So, and let's see. So that's like one rule where you have to like split it if there's two independent clause. But now let's try to see the comma splice. The comma splice is, so we talked about this one. Are you familiar with the comma splice in a sense?
Yeah.
Or okay, so this is a comma splice, right? Because the rule here is you could put just a semicolon or like the and, but when you or you put a comma, but then when you put a comma, you have to put in something else. So you have to put in like an and, like I walk and I run. And this right here is good because you have this subject right here. So it's good to have comma and an and when you have two subjects. If you take out this I right here, and it's I walk and run, you could just put in and then you call that like the compound predicate. So that's how you recognize it. This is a comma splice. Sometimes like people just put in commas to pause. A lot of it we're gonna talk about that next one, but like it's not really a comma that you put to pause. It's more like a dash. So for this guy, what about this guy? Like when you put then here, this is a pretty common one. What's wrong with this one?
Then is in a coordinating conjunction.
Yeah. So it's not one of these guys. So this can only work if you have any of these guys. This I think is the last one we're going to talk about, is a subordinating conjunction.
Mm-hmm.
And this is that word that, like, when that starts off like a dependent clause, like although this, then you have, that's the independent, and then you have an independent after that. And there's a bunch of those, like for the coordinating one, it's only these guys. I think there's like 7, but then for the subordinating one, there's a lot of those. And then there's a list. I'll show you that in a bit. So okay, for this one, how would you fix it? You just either replace that with a semicolon, pretty similar, or replace it with an and or whatever, which one makes sense. Make it 2 sentences that we talked about. Or here, the other one, add a subordinating conjunction to make the independent clause a dependent clause. So this guy, it's kind of similar. The Yankees played my high school baseball team, and then if you take a look at over here, there's nothing in here. So these are 2 independent ones, and then there's no coordinating conjunction, or there's no semicolon, or there's no and, or there's no period. So those are the things that you have to look for in most of these. Let's take a look at another one. So a lot of these, like comma splice, the one thing to remember there is if there's a comma, but there's no coordinating conjunction, that's a comma splice. Okay. Okay, so here I just wanted to like maybe give an example of like when to use a semicolon, when not to use it. So for these ones, there's nothing wrong with them. This is just an example of like if you read this guy, this is an example of a serial list, or like a list of items. So for example, if you look at this, so this is like a city, and then this is the country, or, and then you have these guys, right? They're all repeating. And then if you didn't put this semicolon, you're gonna get confused. But this is always the case. Every time you see something like this, the correct one is just to put a semicolon. And then here's another one where it's not really like a list, it's more like a thought, where you go with, this is the first guy right here, right? First thought, and then you have like going to the park, you list a bunch of things. But then you have another one, and you just kind of like say, talking about like or like have a sequence of events. That's another time that you can consider putting a semicolon. And then let me see this one. Oh yeah, this is the guy where I was talking about, like, if you read this, the first one right here, this is a independent clause, and there's this guy, which is like a dependent clause, because you have this guy right here, this conjunctive adverb. So even though I said like the semicolon, you connect them with like 2 independent clauses. If there's when you put like this conjunctive adverb or in front of either this guy or this guy, then that's the time when you could actually make it work, where you have like an independent and a dependent. There's more on this later. This is actually just because it's also a time to talk about it when there's a semicolon, but we'll kind of define what that is, a conjunctive adverb. And then I guess here you go. Here's one where you don't really like, sometimes like, do you even capitalize or do you not? This is the example for that, for a semicolon, where the capitalization rule is if this right here, so you have the semicolon, right? And then the word after it is a proper noun or an acronym. Acronym is always capitalized either way, so you don't have to worry about, but like a proper noun. And if it's none of those, then it has to be lowercase. If it's none of those guys. And let's see. Oh yeah. So this is right here, like you've probably seen as a compound predicate. This is just a formal word for it. But when you have this but right here, this coordinating conjunction, but this guy doesn't have a comma. There's no comma here. And the reason why is because there's this relationship between this and this guy, where there's only one subject that they're sharing. So these 2 verbs or predicates are sharing this performer. So that's the only time. Like you can make this like a comma and a but. They say the former tried to grab this trapeze, comma, but he missed. But he missed. So you have this guy right here, which is, that's proper grammar if you put a subject there. If there's no subject there, then you have to take out the comma. And same thing with this, you could use but, and what else is this? Or. This one's a pretty common one. When you have like two things, the or one's more, it's easier to see. And what about this one? So, oh yeah, this is just showing like when to use those, like for these guys. So like usually you use a for when you're doing like a cause and effect. So for example, this guy, I shook his hand, and it acts like a because. So I shook his hand, and it says for right here, comma, and a conjunction. You always do that. I shook his hand for he was a jolly good fellow. So it's like there's a relationship between these two. It's like a positive relationship, and it's like because because he was a good fellow, then I shook his hand. So it's like a cause and effect. And then same with this and. If you're gonna do like I walk and I run, then there must be like a positive relationship. It's less likely like the for, because for is like more like a sequential. Like this one, you don't have to like I walk and then you run. You could do that separately, but there's a relationship still. Nor if you use nor is more like a negative. Like you know that one already. If you're gonna say, so this guy's negative, he doesn't do something, and then nor does he not. Like if it doesn't here, then this is also negative. And so that's the relationship between nor. And then if you use but is a contrast. So there's a contrast between this guy and then this guy. And then if you use or is also a positive relationship, but you don't have to do both of them. It's either one. The and one, it's more like you're doing both of them, so you know that already. So yet is kind of like but, and then so is kind of like for. Okay. So let me look at this one. You can skip these ones. Okay, so that's all about like semicolons and like the coordinating and commas, splices. Now let's talk about colons. So colons, when you're talking about colons, this is like one thing that a lot of people usually ask is you can actually do similar things with a colon as a semicolon. What it is before the semicolon, it must be an independent clause. So let's take a look at this, because even I get this confused. So before the semicolon, it's an independent clause. After the guy, this can be dependent or independent. But before is the one that has to be restrictively independent. And the only exception to this rule is if you have a quote. So like we'll show you that. If you have a quote, then this can be dependent. But this has to be the rule for colons. And then you use this to introduce a list, connect two independent clauses or dependent, and it's also used to introduce a statement or like a quote. And another rule for semicolon similar to the to semicolon is when do you capitalize? You only capitalize if it's a proper noun, the word after the colon, after this guy right here, or if it's an independent clause. So if it's an independent clause, you capitalize. If it's a dependent, you lowercase. So let's show you some examples of that. So for example, this guy. What is wrong with this one?
You don't need the colon.
Yeah. So for this one, yeah, that's exact. You can actually remove it, and this is something like oftentimes, like when, like for me, I was like, why do you need to use this? But I guess that's like the one rule that some people forget it. But when you have like this right here, like before the colon, this is actually a dependent clause because this is not a complete thought. Like you have for right here. Yeah, maybe if you're like talking, like you could do that. Like the manager is responsible for, and then you pause, like then you say a list. But this is, in order for the, yeah, you could definitely, this will be read correctly or written correctly if you just remove that guy. Because then, you know, there's nothing wrong to just say like for ordering this guy, right? The other thing is like, you could actually just remove this one. You can remove that and say the manager is responsible, and then say something else, like maybe they're responsible for you know, many things, and then you say like a list that's related to what he's responsible for. So, and this one is kind of similar. When you look at this, like this clause before the colon, this is also like a dependent clause. His favorite sports teams are, what is that? You know, like are what? So you either have to like finish that sentence or just remove like this guy, because then it's a complete thought. If you remove it, you always check if it's still a complete thought. So, and this guy, this is the one when it's finally actually used correctly, is if you check the clause before the colon, I have 3 hobbies. There's a subject, there's a predicate, that's a complete thought. And then anything after this guy, after the colon, we don't really care. It could be dependent or independent. For the most part, it's usually a list for the most part. So that's a list. This is a list. This is also a list. And then this one. For this one, like if you look at this, this is an independent, and this is also a independent. So you could do this. So the only time you capitalize this is like, again, when it's a proper noun or an independent clause. So that's the only time. If this is dependent, like these other guys, it's not capitalized. None of them are capitalized. Only when it's an independent. That's like the other rule, like that's like deep in there. It's like, oh, that's what you do. So this other one is just another example. It's like a short explanatory statement. You know, you're just saying something about like whatever this guy. So something related to it. And this is the one where this is like an exception to the rule of like the clause before the colon has to be independent. For a quote, if there's a quote here, then this guy doesn't have to be, this can be a dependent clause. My dad always said what? So that's why, you know, obviously you're introducing the quote. So that's why, but also I thought this applied, this only applies here. This applies here only. Everywhere else, it has to be an independent. Okay. Okay, now let's talk about the last punctuation, dashes. So dashes, you've seen dashes before, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, dashes, so sometimes, you know, they're not usually mostly used in like fiction or narrative, whatever types of stories, passages. But like nowadays, they're actually introduced more in, you know, like nonfiction and more formal languages. But what it is really used for is it functions like a comma or a colon. But the one thing is sometimes it's not like directly, it's like more like, you know, implied, but it adds emphasis. That's the difference. Like it does add, it replaces a comma or a colon, but in addition, it adds emphasis. And you want to be consistent. You know, when you're doing these two replacements, like for example, you have like, I'll show you in a bit. Like, you know, you don't want to be using like commas and dashes together, like in that same context. Like if you were to use commas, you should just keep using commas. If you're using dashes, then you should just use dashes. And another way that they're being used, besides like replacing a comma or colon, is to show an interjection. So like, usually interjection is like, you know, there's a pause and then it's like at the end of it, it's an exclamation point. It's more like an expression. So that's like interjection. And we'll show some examples of those. But one of this first one right here is kind of like an example of mixing like a dash and a comma. And this is what I mean. Like when you have this guy right here, and then you have a comma right here. So you have a dash before the sentence, and then you have a comma. You cannot do this one. Like you either have to choose one or the other. This has to be either a dash, or you just make this guy a comma. You can't mix and match. I mean, yeah, this is kind of like that one rule, but for the most part, it still functions like a comma or a colon. So this other one right here is, let's see. So not only that you can do that, that means like all rules of commas and colons apply to dashes. So it's kind of like, it's that extra thing, but then you have to use it the same way. So for this guy, right, you have to. That's a dependent clause. And then, so you can't just add like a dash there. What you could do is just remove this guy. And it works. That one's just a little common sense. Like you have to, and then what's going on, so just remove it, and it reads appropriately. So this guy right here, there's nothing wrong, just showing you a few things that you could use it. This is an example of like using it as a comma. So, you know, you sandwich this guy with the dash. This other one is using as a comma again. You sandwich the list with a dash, and then this next one functions like a colon. So as a colon, the one before the dash in this case has to be independent, is it? There are only two guarantees in life: subject, then predicate. It's a complete sentence. And this guy doesn't matter if this can be dependent or independent. So that works. This next one is showing an interjection. So let's look at it. So his continued quest, and then I would say failure. So it's kind of like a pause, interjection. So if you had like, you wanted to say something, you know, in the middle of like a sentence, because you could just read this completely. His continued quest to win the lottery drained his bank account. So in this sense, if you remember, we talked about like last time, when you have this, you can technically just remove this guy, and this right here should be a complete sentence. Same with these guys, you can remove them, and then these guys should be a complete sentence. And with this one, this is an example of another interjection. So why did you buy the, and then this is, oh, never mind. So for this though, like as you can see, it's just an interruption. So this is allowed, even though this guy isn't really like, why did you buy this? It's not really a sentence, so you're fine there. So dashes are really like, if you just have to know like when to use them. It's easier to see like, you know, when to use them, and it's kind of like this interjection one, you might think sometimes like, oh, this isn't really a complete sentence, but when you have an interjection, or it seems like it may not work, but this is actually correct. It's just one of those things that you have to see them and what applies, and then kind of like look at the choices. And then for this one, it's another interjection. Yeah, another interjection. Okay, last part, subordinating conjunctions. So I just wanted to show you, like, I'll actually give this to you like later, after I finish all of this. But when we're done with this, the best thing is to remind, you know, ourselves, like, what are the different parts. So there's this, you know, the fanboys, as I said, for, and, nor, but, or, y, and s. So these are all the conjunction, coordinating conjunction. And then there's also another one called subordinating conjunction. So there's a lot more for this guy. So just like knowing what they are, you know, not really memorizing them, but just knowing it. Because this one's pretty easy, because we take subordinating conjunctions. We're really used to this. If we, you know, like, this is what we use in our like everyday language, really. Like we know how to use these ones. But these are just like the common ones. So let's just talk about what they are. Subordinating conjunctions. So this guy is this is a type of conjunction that it's before a dependent clause. So as I said, that you have, like, you know, independent, this can work either way, right? You can have the subordinate conjunction plus the independent clause, and this would make it a dependent clause. So you usually put this like in the beginning of like independent clause. It becomes a dependent clause, and then this whole thing added to a second guy. And that's usually how it is. It's either at the beginning and there's a comma and then there's this, you know, independent clause, or there's an independent clause and then a comma. Usually actually, hold up. Usually when you have an independent clause there and a dependent, you don't need a comma. I believe that's the one. Yeah. But if you have the dependent clause first, like although this, you need a comma. If you have the independent clause first, you don't need a comma here. But this is usually what it's used. Like this dependent clause is what this guy is. So it's like a subordinate coordinate plus the independent makes it become a dependent. But you've seen these guys though, right? This guy right here. It's just the form. It's just the formal name.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, as I said, the words are in that list. And then one rule with this is the most important rule probably with the subordinating one, and then the coordinating is like you'll see this and then you'll think like, oh, it seems like it makes sense, but it's actually a bad grammar. Like you cannot mix a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Remember, that was like the beginning one where you have a comma and a coordinating conjunction, the fanboys, and this plus a subordinating plus an independent makes it like a dependent. You cannot mix these guys. You can either only have an or here. You can either use this or this guy. You cannot mix them. Once you mix them, like it's bad grammar. I'll show you when that happens. But before that, let's take a look at what these dependent clauses, coordinating conjunctions are. So this guy, this unless is your subordinate conjunction. This Elizabeth joins the club, that's without the unless, that's a independent. With the unless, that becomes a dependent. So a solution for this is just, you either remove the unless because this is already a complete sentence, right? Or you add a comma and then another independent, because then it makes it dependent, comma, independent, which checks off. This, so this one's kind of similar. Let's take a look at one that's different. But this is kind of different. So you have two sentences here. You have this one that's independent. And you have a sentence here, which is not really a sentence, it's a fragment, because then this is a dependent, right? Because you have this guy right here. So when you have this, something like this, I would either remove the because and then create like just the dog ate my homework. That's good, right? And to replace it with like replace the period with a comma. So it's not my fault, comma, because the dog ate my homework. That works. Let's take a look at, so here you go. Here's the most important one. This is the combination of a subordinating clause with a comma and a coordinating conjunction. The reason why it's incorrect, let's just read it. Even though my brother stole my robot, but I wouldn't hold it against him. It seems like it makes sense, but the structure of the sentence doesn't make sense. Like it's the wrong grammar because you have this even though, which is your subordinating conjunction. This whole thing now is a dependent clause. And then this comma and a but, that right there is a comma and a coordinating conjunction. So you just combine these guys, and we can't do that. You've seen this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is the one where it seems like it makes sense, but the moment you see it, you just have to break this one. Like, okay, this is a dependent. Once you see where this dependent is, it's really easy. So you just either, if you don't find this guy, it's obviously okay. If you find him, this is not the right one. And then how you correct that is like the first thing here is remove the but, right? Yeah, obviously we just remove the but. So even though you still need the comma because it's dependent, then I won't hold it against him. So that's independent. Dependent, comma, independent is good. And this one is why not just remove the even though? You could either remove the subordinate conjunction. So let's read that. My brother stole my robot, but I wouldn't hold it against him. It works. So you just can't combine those. That's the rule. Same with this one. So you have this guy, right? So this is a subordinating conjunction. And then you have this other guy, therefore. You also can't do this one. This is the therefore is kind of like a subordinating conjunction. So you have when, and then you have an independent, you have a dependent clause, and then you have a dependent clause. So you can't have that, right? It's not even a sentence. When, therefore, I felt asleep. You can't have that. You could the sentence would be, this has to be an independent clause. You can't have like two dependent clauses and then comma to connect them. So the solution here is to remove the therefore or remove the when so that you can create the independent clause. So either you do this or, hold up, you either do that or you do this. But you cannot have this guy. You cannot have that one. And okay, so let's take a look at these couple of ones, and we're almost done. So let's, this one right here is, this is just how you would use a, this dependent clause and independent clause. So this is the guy, right, because the company, and then that's the dependent one, and this is the independent. So we know that one. This one is also another one. We don't need a comma, as I said, if you put the independent first and then the dependent after. You don't need it. Like, you've seen this type of sentence before. So, all those right here. The other one right here is different because the dependent one is before the independent. That's when you need a comma. And then you've seen this, I think we didn't really touch on it, but how you correct this, just to put it all together, is, you can't just use a comma because that would just that's comma splicing because they're two independent clauses. And then how you would resolve this is you could use a semicolon because they're two independent clauses. That works. Another one is you can just use, since there's already a comma, you can just put in a coordinating conjunction, so that works. The next thing would be maybe add a period, so two sentences, two independent clauses, that works. And then the other one would be to add a subordinating conjunction to make the independent clause a dependent clause, such as when. You could put when right here. When the Yankees played my high school baseball team, and then the result is the independent clause, we won. Okay, does that kind of make sense? And that all of that is kind of related, like punctuation and conjunctions.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I know it's you've seen it before. It's just like a review, and it's even I for the colon ones. It's like I had to remind myself that you could do that. Okay, let's take a look at the examples now. Okay, just looking at. We will do like 2 passages if we can. How did you find the first one? Was that easy?
It was okay.
Okay, we're gonna we're gonna cover all 4 sections, but for now we'll probably go like 2, 1, and then 3 and 4. So you're gonna see them, if you've already seen the questions, that's good. If you want to do some of them. So okay, did you look at this one? I think I sent this to you.
I don't think so.
Okay. It should be the let me see, the email with the Zoom link.
Oh, okay. Let me see.
Do you find it?
Yeah, I'm just unzipping it.
Okay. Yeah, this one, like, as I was comparing the very first passage with the first one, this one's actually pretty good. They have more grammar questions than rhetoric.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. Maybe we'll just go one by one. I think there's not much. There are a couple rhetoric ones, but maybe let's go over number one first. This is the first one.
B.
Yep. Yeah, this one's good. This is like not bad. So like this reducing thing and then this deducting. This is that kind of you've heard of this word before, the gerund or whatever.
Yeah, I think so. I forget what it means though.
It's every time you use like this ing and you make it a verb
Oh, yeah.
into like a noun. You make it like running is my favorite sport, like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
like running is a gerund. So this doesn't really make sense here because they want a noun, and this is the only one. This one's also a verb. Okay, what about this guy?
D.
B, yeah, that's correct. So if you look at however, and then I think, yeah, however, usually you usually use this when there's like when the previous sentence and then this sentence are in contrast, but that's not the case here. Consequently is the best one because like it's kind of like, okay, this and then so that this one supports the previous. When you say like previously, it could work, but it's not as strong as like, like this is like what happened after. This is the reason, like the reason why in the beginning, and then this is like the consequence. So previously, nah, but nevertheless is really, it's just way too strong. So nevertheless is like, okay, because of you're not really concluding anything here. And you usually use this to conclude. So that's why it's B. Okay. What about 3?
No change.
Yeah. So this one's it's not bad. These two definitely you can't do these ones, right? Because like, if you read this trend combined with this trend is already this is just a clarification. So this strand has led. So that sounds good. Let's check the other ones. This strand have led. That's no good because this is just a singular. So it has to be has. Can't be that. And then these other ones. This strand which have. You can't do that, right? Like this strand what? And which has. You can't do that. So because this strand is not a sentence. You can only do these ones if it's a sentence. Okay. What about this one? I think this is a rhetoric one.
C.
Okay, hold on, let's check this one. So they want you. So the writer is considering adding the following. So this guy should. Where did they want to add it? It's like right here. At this point, the writer is considering adding the following information. At this guy. As a result, librarians must not be compiling. Compiling and updating these collections. As a result, librarians must now be preparing creators and compiling ebooks, audio. This one's a little confusing because, like, yeah, it seems like it does interrupt it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for some, like if we remember the dashes one, you could put them anywhere as long as like, because this right here is not really like it fits the flow. So if you put it in there, as a result, librarians must now be proficient creators in compiling, ebooks, audio, blah, and it gives you all these examples and updating collections. So this one actually the right answer is like A.
Okay.
But yes, C seems like it does interrupt the flow. It can't be D. It doesn't weaken it. It'll only strengthen it because you're adding a few things. It can't be B because like it's not a reason. It's a list. But it's either A or C. But the answer here is A. So these are one of those things.
Okay.
That like, if there's like the last thing, it would be this guy because it's like one or two.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like when you see dashes, these are the more, like I said, these are the like we were going over like if the sentence before the dash is a sentence or is a fragment. When you see a dash, it's really those times when you have to pause and like think about if it's actually a sentence or does it work? Does the flow work? But it doesn't happen that much though. So at least you can be rest assured that you're good there. What about 5? In the world. You have it in front of you. Okay, you have it in front of you, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
D.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct. Okay. This one we don't have to explain it that much. 6. What about 6?
D.
Yes. That's weird. The way I have it here, like, you have it in front of you, right? You said
Yeah.
it's the 6 is actually not numbered the same way as this guy, which is weird. This is supposed to be a 6, but yeah, it is D. Let's take a look at 7. Yeah, it's not numbered correctly. This is weird. This is supposed to be 7. This is another rhetorical. Actually, like this one's a little. It's not tough, but like you have to look for the sentence as grammatically correct and also placing it there correctly. That's effective with like all the other sentences. It's like a combination. For this one, I would look for like which one doesn't have a redundancy.
Okay. C.
Okay, so this one's a little bit difficult. So like there's two things here, like redundancy, and then like the other one is like maybe like flow. I guess flow. Redundancy meaning like, so if you look at this guy, like the librarians here is like repeated right many times. So this one's not the one. Let's take a look at C. So if you look at see, training now includes courses and research, and many librarians, in fact, are teaching classes. So this one, like, it depends on the flow. This one's more like a flow. And this guy right here, like, let's check a look at it. Including certain, in fact, 1 minute teach classes. So it's kind of like a flow. Like if you take a look at these three, uh, it's more like the flow of the sentence, and then you have to relate it back to this guy and then what's in here. So the main answer to this one is like B. Was that your second answer?
Yeah.
Why wasn't it like D? It's probably because of this guy, this in fact right here.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't sound right. So that's probably when you would remove it. And then when you compare B and C, it's another one of those. You take a look at training now includes courses in research and in research methods. Okay, that's good. Many librarians, in fact, many librarians are teaching classes in so that's good grammar. That's independent and independent. But what about this one? In fact, many librarians whose training now includes courses in research teach classes on internet database and digital. I think it's probably because this one is like has a less choppy.
Okay.
This one's a little choppy because like you don't need a semicolon. It's like if you have to choose between like one without and with, choose the one without.
Okay.
So it makes it less choppy. But that one is a little difficult. Yeah. What about 8? Oh yeah, I like this one. We talked about this one.
Delete the underline portion.
Yep. Yeah. So this is that guy, right? You have the while here and the comma and the but.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, they didn't say like delete while. They could have said that one, but yeah, it's either one. What about 9? I think we have to make let's see. Yeah, we probably have to make this the last one. Again, this is a redundancy one. I can spell.
B.
Yeah, B's the answer. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, because C is like, you know, and D, you have this free right here. It's a redundant one. I think C itself, it doesn't make sense because you're measuring, you know, like you are measuring the sources. And then if you put the no change, it's still, you're redundant. There's a redundancy between like what you're saying is free here and then free here. Okay. Okay, so for the rest of these, I guess same thing. It's pretty much like, do you like the practice? It's is it too much or?
No, it's good.
Okay, yeah. So for the next one, we'll probably move. We're not gonna move on to like something else, but it's gonna be kind of. I forgot. I gotta preview you, but I'll send you another video. Kind of just like review of like what we talked about today, and then the next lesson.
Okay.
Okay, Aaron, I think that's pretty good. I have my next client.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Paul, thank you so much.
Oh, hey. Yeah, thank you.
All right.
I like your background.
Oh, it looks familiar, right?
Yeah, I live a little bit south though.
Okay.
Okay. Have a good one.
All right, take care.
Yeah.
Bye.